I still remember the first day the doctor told me I had stage 3 lymphoma. I was 26. I thought I had the flu. A few fevers, some weight loss, and constant fatigue. But the scans didn't lie. The cancer had already spread. The scariest part wasn't the diagnosis. It was what came after. I called my parents from the hospital room, tears in my throat, asking them to come. Their response? "We can't take off work, and your sister just started school. You'll be fine, you're strong." I wanted to believe they were just in shock, that they'd come the next day, or the next. They never did. Not for the chemo, not for the surgeries, not even for the nights I cried myself to sleep in a sterile bed, feeling like a ghost in a living body. They sent flowers once, no card. I watched other patients' rooms fill with family, laughter, soup, silly cards with stick figures. Mine stayed silent, empty. Even the nurses began asking, "Are you sure no one's coming?" At some point, I stopped telling myself stories to protect them. They weren't coming, because deep down, they had already made their choice. They'd always favored my younger sister. She was the sweet one, the one who never talked back, never challenged them. I was the rebel, the disappointment, the one who chose art school over law. So when I needed them most, they saw it as a burden. I was dying, and they let me. But what they didn't know, what they never expected, was that I wouldn't let my story end there. They thought I'd be gone before the will was read. But I had one last thing left to give. A letter. When you're left to die, it's amazing who shows up. My best friend, Elena, wasn't even someone I talked to every day before the diagnosis. But the moment she heard, she was there. With soup. With clean socks. With stories that made me laugh even when I felt like vomiting my guts out from chemo. She became my emergency contact. My emergency everything. I remember one night, my fever spiked to 104. The nurse was trying to reach someone, anyone from my family. No one picked up. Elena drove 45 minutes in a thunderstorm just to sit with me. She held my hand and whispered, "You're not alone. I'm here." And I believed her. In those long nights, we talked about everything. Philael's message shack. How I used to draw pictures of homes with big windows and gardens, because I never felt safe in my own. How my parents constantly compared me to my sister. How even when I got straight A's, it was never as good as her cheerleading trophy. Elena never pitied me. She listened, and one day she said, "I know this is hard to hear, but you don't owe your family anything. You deserve love, not leftovers." That stuck with me. So I did something I never thought I had the strength to do. I changed my will. I removed my parents and my sister, and I gave everything I owned, every penny, every painting, to Elena. But I didn't stop there. I wrote a letter. Not out of revenge, but truth. The kind of truth that cracks like thunder. Because if my family only wanted a piece of me when I was dying, then they deserved to read my voice, loud and clear, from the grave. And I made sure they would. The hospital discharged me after my 3rd round of chemo. I was pale, weak, and my hair had started falling out in clumps. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to go home. Not the apartment I was barely affording, but home in the way every sick person dreams of it. Warmth, care, family. So I called my mother. I asked, gently, if I could stay for a few weeks, just until I regained some strength. The silence on the other end of the line was louder than any words. Then she said it. "We're already helping your sister with her twins. You know how demanding that is." Twins. Right. My sister had given birth a few months before. And suddenly, my being alive was less urgent than her being tired. I hung up quietly. I didn't even cry. Because in that moment, it hit me. I was not the daughter you help when she's dying. I was the daughter you forget existed when someone else needed attention. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love. Through grades, through achievements, even through silence when I should have spoken up. And still, I was never enough. Not as sweet, not as pretty, not as convenient. Elena offered to let me move in with her. And I accepted. She made me smoothies when I couldn't eat, helped me bathe when I couldn't lift my arms. And one day, she shaved my head for me, because watching it fall out in clumps had become too painful. She looked me in the mirror and said, "You're still beautiful." Not a single member of my family ever visited, but I wasn't angry anymore. I was done begging to be loved by people who didn't want to love me back. I started writing the letter that night, not to hurt them, but to free myself. I started the letter not out of rage, but from a place of quiet clarity. It was strange how calm I felt. There was no trembling hand, no tightness in my chest, just truth. And truth, when it's finally spoken, is the most liberating thing. I wrote, "Dear Mom and Dad, I used to think I wasn't good enough, but now I understand. It was never about me. It was about the kind of love you only knew how to give to one child. And I wasn't her. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I didn't scream either. I told them about the nights I lay in the hospital, unable to sleep, waiting for someone, anyone, from my family to show up. How the nurses gave me extra blankets, not because it was cold, but because I was shaking from the loneliness. I told them that my friend Elena became the family they couldn't be. She brushed my hair when it still clung to my scalp. She held my hand when the pain became unbearable. She answered the calls you never picked up. I explained why I changed my will, not out of bitterness, but because I wanted everything I left behind to reflect the love I did receive. That letter became my release. Each word I wrote stripped away a layer of pain I had carried for years. And then I ended it with something that surprised even me. I forgive you. Not because you apologized, but because I no longer need your permission to feel worthy. When I sealed the envelope and left it with my attorney, I felt something shift. I didn't feel like the unwanted daughter anymore. I felt like a woman who had survived more than sickness. I had survived being unloved by the people who were supposed to love me first. And that's its own kind of miracle. Weeks passed. There were moments I thought I might actually beat it. Some scans looked promising. Some days felt almost normal. I found joy in little things again. The way sunlight hit the kitchen floor, the warm smell of bread Elena loved baking, the way she'd hum as she watered the plants. But the truth is, I was getting weaker, and one afternoon, Elena was holding my hand as I sat wrapped in 2 blankets, sipping lukewarm tea, when we heard the knock on the door. It was them, my parents, and my sister, standing on Elena's porch like they had taken a wrong turn and ended up in a life they'd forgotten existed. There were no flowers, no warm greetings, just awkward silence, and then, as if rehearsed, my mother said, "We heard about the will." That was it. Not, "How are you?" Not, "We're sorry we weren't there." Just the will. I looked at them. My sister pretended not to meet my eyes. She looked uncomfortable, like she didn't want to be there but had to play her part in this little performance. Elena, bless her, stood next to me without saying a word. Her presence alone reminded me of the love I had built outside of biology. I told them the truth, that the will had been updated, that everything would go to someone who had shown up, and I said it without anger. Just a steady voice and a tired heart. My mother's face twisted. Disbelief? Maybe rage? My father mumbled something about family obligation. But I had heard it all before. "You let me face death alone," I said quietly, "so don't act shocked that you weren't mentioned in what comes after." No one spoke for a long moment, and then they left. That was the last time I saw them. After the door closed behind them, there was silence. Not an empty silence, but a peaceful one. The kind of silence that comes when a storm has passed, leaving behind a strange, almost sacred stillness. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat there, holding my tea, watching the dust dance in the sunlight streaming through the window. Elena looked at me with her usual quiet concern. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. But I didn't, because there was nothing left to say. They had shown up for something they thought they deserved, not someone they once created. It was heartbreaking, but also freeing. I realized then that their absence during my sickness had taught me something I'd never learned when I was younger: how to stand on my own, how to value the love I give, and, more importantly, how to stop begging for scraps of affection. I had begged for their attention for years, tried to be the good daughter, the obedient one, the responsible one. I made excuses for them, justified the favoritism, told myself, they love differently. But the truth? Some people just don't know how to love equally, and some never try. Elena and I spent that afternoon talking about everything but them. Visti, we watched an old movie I loved. We laughed. She made pasta, and I helped, even though I had to sit most of the time. It felt like any normal day, and that made it special. I didn't need closure from my parents. I had written my letter, I had spoken my truth. And in doing that, I had closed a door that should have never stayed open for so long. They might have left empty-handed. But I was finally full of peace, of clarity, of the quiet power that comes from letting go. It started with a blank page. Just a simple sheet of paper on my nightstand, untouched for days. I'd glance at it every morning, every evening, knowing what it was for, but not knowing how to begin. Writing a will is one thing, but writing a letter, one that would live on after me, felt heavier than anything I'd ever done. Heavier than chemo. Heavier than the disappointment of my family. Because this letter wasn't just for them. It was for me. One evening, after Elena had gone to bed, and the house was still, I picked up a pen. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. It was from the weight of everything I'd held in for so long. I wrote slowly. At first, it was just facts. Dates. Decisions. Where things would go. But soon, the words turned personal. To my parents. You raised me, but you didn't really see me. You didn't hear me when I was crying quietly in the corner of rooms filled with love only for my sister. You didn't check in when I disappeared emotionally. And when my body began to fail, you let my heart break without even showing up. I paused, tears welling up. I wasn't writing out of anger. Not anymore. I was writing for the version of me that had waited at every school play, every family dinner, every hospital visit, only to realize they wouldn't come. But I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I don't want to carry your silence anymore. Then I wrote to my sister. I told her I hoped she would one day realize what being truly seen meant, and that maybe, when she becomes a mother, she'd learn to love all her children equally, not just the one that made her feel most important. And lastly, I wrote to Elena. You were my family when I had none. You were my warmth when life went cold. I leave everything to you not because I owe you, but because you gave me something priceless. Dignity, in the face of abandonment. I sealed the letter that night, not out of spite, but as a final act of truth, of peace. It was no longer about what they took from me. It was about what I had chosen to give and to whom. It was strange. After months of silence, after years of absence disguised as busyness, my parents walked through the door of the hospice like they had just returned from vacation. My mother clutched her purse like it was a lifeline. My father scanned the room, eyes darting around like he wasn't sure where to sit. And beside them, as always, was my sister, glowing, perfect, polished, dressed for a funeral, but not for mine. I remember Elena stiffened beside me when she saw them. She had been the one feeding me soup that morning, adjusting my pillow every 20 minutes, keeping my spirits alive with stories and songs. But she stood up, offering them her chair, because that's the kind of person she is. They didn't even greet her. "Hi, sweetheart," my mother said, leaning down and kissing my cheek. It felt like cold porcelain brushing my skin. "We wanted to check in," my dad added. "We heard, well, you're in your final days." He said it like it was a rumor. Like death was a party they hadn't been invited to and were now trying to crash. I didn't say much. My voice wasn't strong. But I didn't need words to see what was happening. They weren't here for me. They were here for what I had left behind. My sister sat at the foot of my bed, looking around. "This is a nice place," she said. "Must have cost a fortune." Elena excused herself. She later told me she couldn't bear the insult. Watching them act like this was a family reunion instead of a farewell, I looked my parents in the eyes one by one, and I asked them something simple. "Why now?" My mother blinked. "We're family," she replied. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the word family, thrown like a band-aid on a wound they never cared to see. But I had already written the letter. I had already found peace. And so, I just smiled, because I knew soon, very soon, they would discover that inheritance isn't just about what you receive. It's about what you deserve. And they were about to find out what I believed they truly did. The hospice nurse called my lawyer the morning I passed. She said I went peacefully, Elena holding one hand, the other resting on the letter I asked her to give them. I wasn't there for the moment it all unfolded. But Elena told me everything. The lawyer's office was quiet. My parents wore black, as if grief could be worn like a costume. My sister looked bored, scrolling through her phone until she realized the proceedings were about to begin. My lawyer was calm. Direct. Professional. He opened the envelope I had sealed a few months prior and began to read aloud. The will was simple. I had made sure of that. To my sister, who always believed she deserved more, I leave the silence I received in return for her indifference. I hope one day you understand that love is not earned through favoritism, but presence. To my parents, who taught me the meaning of abandonment far better than they ever taught me how to live, I leave a letter instead of money, because what you need is not cash, but clarity. And then he paused. Elena, sitting quietly beside them, watched as my father shifted in his seat. My mother frowned, my sister scoffed. The lawyer pulled out the letter and handed it to them. "You let me go long before death came," the letter began. "When I begged you to visit, to call, to acknowledge that I was sick, you chose comfort over compassion. You chose her over me. Now that I'm gone, you may feel entitled to what I built. But what I built wasn't just a bank account. It was trust. It was forgiveness. And you broke both. There was silence. No money. No property. Everything. The savings, the insurance, the small apartment was left to Elena. The one who stayed. The one who cared. She was just a friend," my mother stammered. "No," Elena finally said. "I was the family she never had." They left quietly. I wasn't there to watch it, but I imagine the silence on their drive home was heavier than anything they'd carried before. They thought inheritance was about wealth, but they never realized the most valuable thing I had was my love, and they had already lost it. If you're listening to this, it means the story has been told. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there is feeling a little less alone because of it. You see, when I was at my weakest, what hurt wasn't the pain in my body. It was the silence from the people I once loved most. My parents, who once rocked me to sleep, turned into shadows the moment I needed them. My sister, who used to braid my hair and share secrets under the blanket, became a stranger wrapped in entitlement. But I'm not bitter, not anymore, because in my final days I found something they never gave me. Peace. I found it in the quiet mornings when Elena brought me tea and asked me how I was really feeling. I found it in the way she brushed my hair without being asked. I found it in the laughter we still managed to share, even with time slipping through our fingers. They say when you're dying, your life flashes before your eyes. For me, it wasn't my life. It was the people, the real ones. The friend who held my hand through every treatment. The nurse who hummed lullabies when I couldn't sleep. The strangers who wrote letters of encouragement after reading my blog posts. And most of all, the version of me that chose to forgive, but not forget. That version of me refused to let the people who walked away define the way I left this world. So I wrote a letter. Not for revenge, not to shame, but to say what needed to be said. You can love people and still choose yourself. You can grieve the parents who are still alive. You can rebuild a heart they broke and fill it with new people, better people. And if you're someone who's been cast aside, If your family turned their back when you needed them most, hear me now. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. And even if the people who should have stood by you walked away, you can still choose to live, to forgive, and to find your own version of family. This is my final goodbye. Not with anger, but with clarity. I didn't die bitter. I died free. And that's my legacy.